about the situation. As we've been reporting, there was a stabbing rampage at Vaughn Foods near Northeast 12th and Eastern yesterday. Police say Alton Nolan walked into that warehouse and stabbed 2 women. 1 woman died. The other is in critical condition at OU Medical Center. We have confirmed this morning that the woman who died was 54-year-old Colleen Hufford. Let's take a listen to more police.
Just kind of start from the beginning yesterday about our incident. About 4:05. More police received a call from Vaughn Foods, which is located at 216 Northeast 12th Street here in Moore. It's a food processing plant just off of 12th Street. The caller advised that someone had been stabbed and had heard gunshots. When officers arrived, they entered the business, treating it as an active shooter situation. Once inside, officers found 2 victims that had stab wounds, also a subject that had been shot. Our tactical team secured the business and eventually searched the entire business and found no other victims or suspects inside the business. Basically, our initial investigation shows the suspect is Alton Nolan, which is ALTON Nolen, birth date's 8/16 of '84. He was an employee of Vaughn Foods. He was in the process of being terminated. As he was terminated, he drove to the front of the business, running into a vehicle, exited his vehicle, entered the business, where he encountered the first victim, Colleen Hufford. That's C-O-L-L-E-E-N, Hufford, H-U-F-F-O-R-D. Her birth date's 1/5 of '60, and began assaulting her with a knife. He did kill Colleen and did sever her head. He then encountered a second victim, who is Tracy Johnson, T-R-A-C-I Johnson, 6/17 of '71, and began assaulting her with the same weapon. A short time after that, Mark Vaughn, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Vaughn Foods and is also a Oklahoma County Reserve Deputy, confronted Nolan and at that time shot him and stopped the threat and the assault that was taking place. Both the second victim and the suspect were transported to the hospital and are now in stable condition. After conducting interviews with co-workers of Nolan, information was obtained that he recently started trying to convert some of his co-workers to the Muslim religion. Due to the manner of death and initial statements of co-workers and other initial information that our investigators have gathered, we requested the assistance of the FBI in conducting a background investigation into Nolan. And that is about where we are at this point. There still is an investigation going on. It's 2 separate incidents that we're looking at. We do have a homicide that our investigators are looking at, and we have requested the assistance of the FBI in looking into the background of the suspect. If you have any questions, I can try and take some of those.
So were these folks in the front office area, or was it production line area?
The incident occurred in the front office area, as towards the entrance of the business, yes.
What type of weapon?
This was a standard type knife used in the business in their duties.
So this knife came from inside the facility?
I don't have that confirmed, but that's the type of knife that was used.
When exactly was Alton Nolan let go of fire? Or was he said to be fired at that?
He was, basically the events were right after one another. He was fired at a separate their Human Resources is a separate location just on the property. He drove from there to the entrance of the business.
And had no relation with the 2 victims?
There are no relation between the victims or the suspect, no.
Is there any report of him making any statements or saying anything during the assault?
I don't have that information right now. As far as the actual events during the assault, there are witnesses to it that that's our investigators are talking to.
Was Nolan in the process of being terminated, or had he already been terminated?
He had been terminated, then left, went to the entrance of the business, and that's when he committed the assault.
When you say that he was trying to have been said to, he's trying to convert coworkers, what exactly is that?
Those were just statements that were made to our investigators. That part is still under investigation. I can't comment a lot on that part because that is part of a separate investigation.
Can you tell us if Nolan participated in the Oklahoma Department of Corrections Defender Work Program while employed at Vaughn?
I don't have that information.
Jerry, the entrance to where he went in, is it a secured entrance, or did he have like a key card or something?
I believe you can. It's just an entrance to a business. It wasn't secured. You can just enter the business through that entrance.
Do we know why he was terminated?
I do not. No.
Has he had any sort of previous background in the hat situation like this before, aggressive or attacking?
I do not have any information on his background at this time. No.
Now, do you know how long he worked at Vaughn Foods?
I do not have that, but I can find that out for you.
Were the two female victims, were they just workers in the office? Do you believe it was random?
They were employees of the business. Their exact occupation there, I don't know. I can find that out also. But it did appear random. He wasn't targeting anyone, wasn't going specifically after them. It appears they were just in his way as he came in.
So he was a production line employee at one time, therefore he had access to the knives and...
Correct. That's what his, he was a production line employee.
How many shots did the off-duty officer use to shoot?
That part is still, being that it is a shooting, that part is under investigation. As soon as I can release that, I will. But I don't have the exact, that part is still under investigation.
How long has the officer been with the force?
That I also will find out. I don't have that. We're working with Oklahoma County to get all that information.
In regards to the weapon being fired, did he actually leave Vaughn Foods, go to his vehicle, and retrieve that rifle, or was he armed?
I don't have that exact information, but I know that he did not leave the business. So, but where he obtained the weapon, I don't have that. That also will be in the investigation.
Could you describe Tracy Johnson's injuries?
She had numerous injuries, typical with knife wounds. Not any specifics in one area, it's just numerous knife wounds.
Did it appear that he was trying to behead her too?
Can't really say for sure what he was trying to do at that point, but he obviously was trying to kill her too.
What is her condition right now?
She is in stable condition. It should be noted this off-duty deputy definitely saved Tracy's life. This was not going to stop if he didn't stop it. So, I mean, we are looking at him. He's obviously a hero in this situation. It's very tragic that someone did lose their life, but it could have gotten a lot worse. This guy definitely was not going to stop. He didn't stop until he was shot.
So he was in the process of stabbing?
He was still assaulting Tracy whenever he was shot.
Are employees allowed to go back to work today?
I believe the businesses are back open today, yes.
When the FBI, when you say you brought in the FBI, are they taking over the entire case or working in
We're working in conjunction with the FBI. They're helping with that type of background investigation. They have more of an expertise in those type of backgrounds than us as the Moore Police Department. We're handling the homicide investigation solely, and they're assisting us in the background of Nolan.
The fact that you brought up the Muslim part, is that something that they will also look into? Is that part of your...
That is something they're assisting us with.
Are you looking at a possible act of terrorism at all, or is anyone that said he was looking to possibly convert fellow coworkers to Muslim? I know ISIS.
Just based on statements made by coworkers, that's what brought us to go ahead and contact the FBI just to get assistance on a background investigation in that nature. As far as specifics, that is under investigation, and I can't really comment on those. As soon as I can, I will.
Have investigators been able to talk to Nolan?
He apparently is, he's been in surgery last night. He is becoming more coherent now. As soon as he is able, we do have investigators and officers with him. He will be interviewed as soon as he is coherent enough to be interviewed.
The injuries to Colleen Ford were brutal, all things considered. How was he able, though, to sever her head with just a regular knife during this attack? I mean, this must have gone on for quite some time before Mark was able to come to the rescue.
The attack actually, we had officers on scene very quick. The attack, it didn't go on a long time. Exactly how the injuries occurred, I can't comment on that. That also, is part of the investigation on exactly what events transpired and how the weapon was used. But I do know our response, we were there within minutes of the call, and the deputy was in there within virtually seconds after he began assaulting the victims, or we would have had a lot more victims.
So now, were they in the same room, the two victims?
They were very close.
The police weren't called until after shots were fired.
We were called whenever the first initial call was more of an out-of-control employee, but while on the phone, it escalated very quickly into stabbing and then shots fired. The shots had been fired before officers arrived.
So he was, by the time you got into the building, already down and
Correct.
the situation was pretty much under control at that point.
Right. We didn't know that at that point. We considered it as an active shooting situation, but yes, the threat had already stopped once we arrived. Good. As far as a business, I'm not sure where they get their employees or what type of programs they have, so I really can't comment on that.
But the business was aware of his criminal past.
I really can't comment on that either. I don't know how they do their background checks or anything like that. That's something our investigators will look at. Anything else?
Thank you, Drew.
Appreciate it. I have a press release here if you guys want the information that I basically just released. If I don't have enough,
You are
I
watching
just give you some
KOCO
more.
5 News Live, a press conference with the Moore Police Department, Moore Police spokesperson Jeremy Lewis giving details about the stabbing rampage that occurred there in Moore yesterday. The initial investigation has yielded the information that Alton Nolan is the suspect in this case. He was in the process of being terminated at the Vaughn Foods Company when he apparently drove to the facility, the main building at that company, came in and encountered Colleen Hufford, 54-year-old Colleen Hufford, and assaulted her with a knife. And according to police, he did sever her head, beheading her. Now, the second victim in this case, apparently Tracy Johnson, was assaulted with the very same knife numerous times. She suffered stab wounds. We are told that an Oklahoma Reserve deputy, COO of that company, Mark Vaughn, confronted Nolan, that suspect, and was able to save Tracy's life. Police now hailing him as a hero, saying he prevented much further tragedy in this case. The second victim, Tracy Johnson, and the suspect that you see on your screen here, Alton Nolan, both are in stable condition at an area hospital. There are reports, police are confirming that there are reports that Nolan tried to convert co-workers to Islam, but that piece of this investigation is still ongoing, and due to the nature of the victim's condition as well as the way in which Colleen Hufford died due to the injuries that she sustained, the FBI has been called in to assist with the investigation. Again, all of this centering on the stabbing rampage that happened yesterday at Vaughn Foods there in Moore near Northeast 12th Street. We'll bring you the very latest information here on air and online at KOCO.com.
For live, local, late-breaking news, stay with KOCO 5 News and KOCO.com.